it was really very, very early in the morning. You know, there had been the drumming around the fire all the night as there is, and they go on and on and on, and you fall asleep to the drum, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
And then early in the morning, barely first light, I woke up to hear one drum. Still boom, 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 boom. And I looked out of my camper van window, my VW window, and saw in the morning mist, in the faint light, just a dark figure sitting by the sacred fire drumming. And I thought that was just so beautiful. They were really welcoming in the new day, you know, drumming like a prayer. And I thought, that's wonderful. I should go down and join them. But of course, you know, it's chilly in the morning, and I'm cozy in my duvet, and I snuggle back in and fall straight back asleep, and then get taken into this dream. And in the dream, it's like a continuation of what I've just seen, except the drummer is now getting up from the fire, and he's walking towards me, still drumming, and I get up and out of the van in my dream, and I go down the little ridge to meet him, and as I get closer, he's drumming, and there's just early morning mist. As I get closer and closer to him, I see he's wearing a red jacket, he's got long black hair, he's got a very classic Native American face of, you know, the really hawk-like nose and the long sunken cheeks and everything. And we're so close that I can touch him, and he's still drumming, and then he suddenly stops. And I almost feel like I know him, but I don't know him, but I feel like I know him. And then he sort of holds out the drum and the stick towards me, and he's challenging me, and he says to me, now you take the drum, you call the people. And I just waved my hands. I said, no, I can't take the drum. I don't know how to drum. I've never drummed. I hadn't at that point in my life. I've never drummed. And that's how I woke up, waving my arms in the air, going, no, I can't drum. But my heart was thumping. I was all hot and sweaty. I was all, you know, my heart was just racing. And as it began to calm down, I thought, God, what did I turn down? And I wished I could go back into the dream and take the drum. But I had no idea what it meant, because what do you mean call the people, take the drum and call the people? I can't drum. And anyway, all the people are already here at the gathering, you know. It was already hundreds of people there. What did it mean? And of course, the red jacket is a big thread, because I never put the red jacket, the drummer of my dream, together with Red Cloud, who had the red jacket, right? That famously. Yeah. But the figure in my dream wasn't the elder that I'd met. It was a younger man, just a very classic Native American man. And, I mean, the bit about the red jacket appeared later and later in my experience over the next 6 years, and I never even put it together until I wrote the book. I never got the whole connection between everything. But, you know, the whole thing about dreams is so important. Only if we've been in analysis in our Western society, Western, you know, white society, only if we've been in therapy of some kind do we ascribe any importance to our dreams. But to the native people, they are a key guide in your life. These are the way spirit talks to you in you know, it's one way anyway, the spirit talks to you very loudly and clearly. I didn't know that at the time. I still had to understand, but this dream was more vivid and powerful than anything I experienced before, and it heralded the beginning of a whole series of dreams over the next 3 to 4 years at least, and beyond, while I was involved with the Synodics, that were almost like prophetic, or certainly guiding in nature, where native elders would come in my dreams and tell me to do this, or to go there, or to have that, or whatever, you know?
Wow.
So, but, you know, I mean, the idea, I had no idea he meant call the people. I mean, I didn't know how to drum, I didn't have a drum. But what went on to happen from all of that gathering and the meeting with Bob, and then him later turning up at my place in Vernon, so incredibly, less than 2 months later, let's see, June, it was the end of August, and it was quite extraordinary, really, because after the gathering, my life just fell apart. You know, everything that could go wrong in a person's life did go wrong, and it really took me to the end of my tether. You know, I was always coping really well as a single mum before that, and managing fine, and then just one thing after another went wrong. And it got to a point where I actually broke down. I almost had like Well, I just broke down. I just went to bed and cried. And I never cried for years because I always thought crying was a sign of weakness. And I just cried, and my kids were just shocked to see me like this. And I just kind of said, if only I could find some of that, that light and optimism like there was at the Rebirth of Mother Earth gathering, and some of the hope that I seem to feel there. And it's all gone now, and my life is horrible, and I need help. Anyway, the next day, there's this knock on my door. And I open the door, and there is Bob and his son standing there. So I kind of look, and I say, well, I know that you're on a spiritual journey and that you travel all over the place, but I also know this is a long way from your ancestral lands and from where you live down in the reservation. What are you doing here? And he says, I came because you called.
Wow.
And that shut me up for the next hour.
No doubt.
And then he just said, put the coffee on. We've got a lot to get through. That night I got called my PhD in Native American Studies, really. Yeah. Certainly about the Snakes, because he just told me everything. He told me the whole history. He told me everything what had happened to them, and he told me about their traditions. He told me about and it was a fabulous experience for me because it kind of burned itself into my memory. As you'll see in the book, I recount a lot of it, and it wasn't even like learning something new. It was more like recollecting, but recollecting something I already kind of had, but just needed to be reminded of.
Right.
And so, that long night, right through till dawn. I don't know how much coffee we got through, but I didn't even need the coffee because I was so alive to what this man was telling me about his people. And then, of course, he told me about how there'd been an archaeological dig in his ancestral lands in Balakan, but he didn't tell me the name of the place. I must be clear of that, because he just said there'd been an archaeological dig in his ancestral lands, and they had taken ancestors off to the Provincial Museum in Victoria, and no one had ever informed the descendants about what was going on. And even though I've seen like you probably too, I've seen plenty of bones in museums throughout my life, school trips to museums and what have you, I'd never given them a thought. But when he told me, something happened in me. It was like I felt a huge sense of outrage. And when he said, don't they know that the bones return to dust and the dust from which they sprang? Otherwise, the soul is disconnected and it can't continue on its spiritual journey. It kind of wanders the earth like a ghost. The bones have to be buried in the dust from which they sprang. I thought it was very beautiful, and I just said, well, somebody should go tell the museum that, give them back. Surely they respect your beliefs, Of course, I'm talking to an extinct man here.
Yeah.
And I've got no idea about the politics of bones, which was about to become a big education for me, right? And then he just left. We took his son again in the morning, and off they went again, and they left. And he just said, now we are connected. I had no idea what he meant. I thought I would just take a look, go over to Edgewood and take a look at his ancestral land, which is, Edgewood is on the westward kind of boundary area. It goes up into the Monashee Mountains, right? The boundary, and west of that are the Okanagan Indians. And I thought I'd go and have a look at this, because he sort of painted a picture of the Arrow Lakes and the Slocan Valley very beautifully. I thought I'd go have a look. So I went out on a camping trip with my kids for a weekend. 2 months later, I'm living in a house at Balakan, right on the rim of this ancestral site, which is where the archaeological dig took place. So I'm living 2 months later, it went doom, 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 doom. A whole bunch of miracles, I call them. People call them coincidences or synchronicities. Just fell into place, and I was spirited over to live in this house, and I was living right next to the burial site from which these remains had been taken off to the museum. So even though it wasn't that site that actually physically brought me there, it was a job in the whole school, alternative school in Balakan, that brought me there, to be a teacher. I knew right away that it wasn't about the job, it was about this place. I had a responsibility here, and there was something for me to do here. And nothing happened for ages, because the site at that point had been set aside as a heritage site, because they had just realized this was a unique 40 acres of intact, ancient, going back 5,000 years, further actually, I'm sure, because there's evidence on higher terraces, except it's private land, of habitation, and it was intact, where I think it's the only one of its kind in British Columbia that hasn't been destroyed by inundation or development that's known about,
Yeah.
But BC Heritage Trust were trying to acquire it. They had already set it aside, and they were trying to buy it, but it was very interesting. The guy who owned it, an estate agent, he said he wouldn't sell except over his dead body, and if he doesn't go bankrupt. So his financial body dies, and he has to give it up. He had to sell the site. And so it was when the BC Heritage Trust acquired it, and they decided to develop it into a tourist attraction. And the local people who were kind of stewards of the site, known as the Vatican Archaeological Park Society, they were advised that they would have a part in this, and they needed to put together some kind of management plan. And a friend of mine who also lived on the edge of the site had a dream. Came rushing down at dawn the next morning to tell me his dream, which was, Celia, you've got to put yourself forward as coordinator for this management plan. I thought he was absolutely nuts. He said, no, I had a dream. Only you can do it. You know the Indians involved. You know the descendants. You know the site inside out, because the 6 months I'd lived beside it by then. I had walked it and walked it and walked, and I knew it intimately. And I sat there and meditated, and lots of things happened. That's where I actually got my sumiks, which in their language is your sort of sacred power of your guardian animal, totem animal, if you will, or power animal or medicine animal. Except it's a much deeper concept than we understand with those words. So he said, you must put yourself forward. And that night, there was a meeting. So I went to the meeting and I put myself forward to do the job, and I was unanimously accepted. It blew my mind. I never dreamed. So there I was, set up to do what became privately. I was paid by a grant, right? But it always got to be that I said, I'm employed by the society for this management plan. I'm paid by the government, but I'm working for the Indians. Because to me, the only thing I wanted to happen to that site was that the Sinaics should come back, take care of their ancestors, and take care of their ancestral village. And that was my only goal in the whole taking on of that position and what happened next.
Yeah, and this is really the backbone of A Twist in Coyote's Tale. This is really the foundation of the whole book.
Well, this is the trigger that drew me in so powerfully to become involved with the people who were literally drawing together again from being fragmented and disinherited, and many of them not even, as I would learn, not even knowing why they were called Lakes Indians. That's the anglicized, version of their name, Arrow Lakes Indians, because as they said, there's no lakes where they live on the Colville Reservation. Why are we called Lakes Indians? They had, lost touch with their roots to that extent, many of them. So I got to become involved with the people who were returning out of extinction and out of exile, as it were, and coming back home, called by the ancestors, because what drew them together with a hugely powerful force, I think more than anything else could have, were these 6 ancestors now languishing in the Provincial Museum in Victoria. We want our ancestors buried at rest, at peace. And this drew them together as a people in a way that perhaps nothing else could.
Now, this was one of the first reburials in BC, wasn't it?
Yeah, they did set a precedent. Despite being extinct and being in Canada, they did set a precedent in being the first tribe to ask for the remains of their ancestors back to be repatriated.